Welcome to Section 3, Video 4, Creating the Player Characters Code, Part 4, Sprinting. In this video we are going to set up our sprinting, attach a gun to our arms for visual clarity, and prepare our shooting functionality. First we are going to add our gun to our player. Let's open up our player character blueprint. It will automatically show up as a data-only blueprint in some cases. To get everything within the blueprint editor, simply select Open Full Blueprint Editor in the top of the class defaults. Select Gun Mesh. In the Details panel under Skeletal Mesh, select SKFP Gun. Select Save and compile, and we can close Player Character BP. Let's open up our Player Character C++ class. Under Protected, we're going to add a few functions and variables. Here we are declaring our sprint start and sprint end functions that we will be using both in C++ and Blueprint in the future. We are also declaring two pointer variables for particles that we will spawn when we shoot our gun. Under private, we're going to add a function that we don't want to show up in Blueprint, so we're just going to leave it alone without a U function. We're declaring the private function for spawning particles while also having a vector for our parameter, which will be particle location. Let's add our definitions to our functions. For sprint start and sprint end, only create the definition for the underscore implementation. Select Save All. Let's add the code to our source file. In our constructor, we are setting the default values for our pointer variables by setting them to null, which for pointers is the keyword nullPTR. This is also short for null pointer. In begin play, we will be attaching our gun to our arms or FP mesh. Here we are attaching the gun mesh to the component which is our arms mesh and snapping it to a socket which we have named grip point, which is already established on the skeletal mesh. If the skeletal mesh does not have that socket, then it will just return an error and not attach it to that mesh. In our on-sprint implementation, we are setting our sprinting boolean to true and turning off the ability to shoot by setting our shoot boolean to false. Then we are saving our walk speed for when we are not sprinting and then setting our speed to our sprinting speed. You may notice that we are getting errors. This is because we haven't included the library for a U character movement component. Scroll to the top of the page and let's include that file. Now we don't have any errors. In our on-sprint end implementation, we are just setting the opposite of what we did for sprint start, where we would set the sprinting boolean to false, and then we are setting our walk speed to the previous walk speed, and finally allowing us to shoot by setting can shoot boolean to true. For the beginning of the spawn shooting particles function, we are checking to see if our particle pointer variables are valid by putting them within an if statement, which will automatically do the same as typing in not equals null pointer, which is a null value. Then we are spawning our particles and saving that spawned particle as a component pointer. So we are getting the location in memory of where that particle has been spawned and reusing it again to be able to affect its world scale in 3D by inputting a vector and inputting a float which will automatically set it for its X, Y, and Z. Then we are setting a vector parameter that is specific for this specific particle, which is our trail effect, and we are setting it where the end location of the particle will be at where our particle location is. We don't need to set the beginning part because this will start from where it is spawned, which we have set to be our socket location on the gun, which is a muzzle. For hit effect, we are doing something similar, but we are only just setting the scale to 0.25. You may have noticed the errors for our temporary variables, and this is because we haven't included those libraries, as well as for a U gameplay statics, which is a library of functions that we can use to make our quality of life easier and better in terms of coding. Scroll to the top of the page, and let's include those libraries. Now let's bind our action by going to Setup Player Input component. Here we are doing the similar thing of binding an action like we did with jump, but we are doing it for sprint. Since this function is a Blueprint native event function, we only need to call the original function name, and it will automatically call both the C++ and Blueprint versions of the code. Must never call the implementation version of the code. It is generally just good practice as well. Let us compile and test by going to build and rebuild our project. Now that our project has finished compiling, let's jump back to Unreal Editor and let's open our blueprint for player character BP. And in our class defaults, in the details panel, go to gun under the category gun, and let's set our trail and hit effects. For our trail effect, we will be using the P assault rifle trail particle system, and for our hit effect, we will be using P explosion. Save and compile. In the next video, we will be creating the player character's code part 5, shooting.